One of the things I love to talk about is this, and it's like if the church isn't the one who's educating our kids, the world will.
Correct.
As soon as you jump onto the phone, your child is being inundated with hypersexualized content, with content that's targeted either at young girls to softly groom them to think that their only dreams and goals and aspirations should be to be a sex worker. Because again, we have to understand that because we're rescuing about 1 to 4 women from Japan currently every single week. And he said that right now we're seeing that the most watched porn is Japanese porn. So he's like, we're just being over precautious and we're taking every single kind of single female that fits a specific profile in for questioning because there's so much trafficking happening. And I was like, interesting. When we, unfortunately, I think that this toxic era of feminism, whatever it is, and it's destroying men and their essence and who they are and how we champion them and exactly how we love each other and how we're supposed to act.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are viewing us for the Wisdom Pro podcast. I am your host, Victor Claremont. We are excited today in-house. We have Victoria Sinis, founder of Creating Gems.
Yes.
Founding Gems, Creating Gems. All right, I want to make sure I don't get that wrong. She's wonderful. She's come all the way from Australia. She's going to be talking to us about a bit of the darker subjects of the internet today. Victoria Sinis, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So tell us first off, how was your flight coming over from the great place in Australia to the US?
Honestly, it's not that bad. I have this weird, I think it's from God, but whenever I get in a flight, I fall asleep straight away.
That is a blessing.
Yeah.
That is a real
So
blessing.
I slept for 14 hours basically on my way coming here.
So you are really good to go.
Yeah.
All right, Victoria, we had you speak yesterday at the Wisdom Pro conference, The Battle for Your Frontal Lobe. You did a great job with Michael Carducci. Wonderful information you were ended up bringing out there. We're going to try and dive into some of the details of that and maybe some other things that maybe people aren't thinking about, but just for the laity and for the people, because we are introducing you to an audience that fundamentally don't know the dark web, if you will, and a lot of the darker sides of the internet. What is OnlyFans? What is going on with it? We know that factually, at least by 2023 numbers, that OnlyFans had about 305 million reoccurring subscribers across the world, meaning it was generating, by their standards, about 1.3 billion in revenue, possibly 1.6 billion. That's a lot of money going around.
Yeah.
And it seems that year over year, it's gone from 20, 40, 50% growth, sometimes even over 100%. Is that accurate? Let us know. What is OnlyFans? What is going on with it? And how do you end up being a part of it?
Yeah, definitely. Those statistics even in itself just are shocking, hey? But so basically OnlyFans, for people that aren't necessarily aware of it, I like to give the context. I feel like it matters. But OnlyFans was actually started in 2016. And so from my understanding, the whole point of OnlyFans was basically to decentralize social media. So back then, obviously Instagram and kind of Facebook were the juggernaut platforms that you had. As we kind of already know, it's a little bit difficult nowadays to be able to actually build a platform and monetize it. So it seems like OnlyFans was created as a way to be able to decentralize that, have these more like micro communities, and then you can monetize on your hobbies. So an example I like to give is just say if I really love to bake and I could jump onto OnlyFans, I could create an account. It could be behind a paywall that's got locked content. And every single day I could just be sending out recipes, me baking, my tips and tricks, and you could subscribe to my OnlyFans and learn about how to bake the way that I like to. But the whole allure of it is that you can sit there and message me. So I can post a video and it's about recipes or whatever, and then you try and do it, and then you can, hey Vic, I know you sent this, but I don't really know how to do it. Can you help me? And we can have a dialogue. And that's really important. So we kind of see, like, I guess it's kind of a smart, concept if you think about it.
So it really sounds like you were targeting small business owners. And in fact, was that one of the allures that brought you into the marketing campaign of it? That you were thinking, hey, I'm going to be helping a lot of these people, primarily I'm assuming women, that you would be able to help them jumpstart their careers as a small business owner?
So yes and no. For me, I had always I've heard of OnlyFans, and I feel like it's this thing that's just kind of been interjected into our culture. But I didn't really know what it was. So when I was approached to actually come help work for this OnlyFans agency, my lens was like, oh, well, I've heard of OnlyFans. I don't really know what it is. There was some sort of connection to it being like a sexual innuendo thing, because in 2020, it actually blew up as like a porn platform because it has this thing called not safe for work content. So that's where I was like, I think that like you can just sell your feet on there. Like, I don't really know. But all that I knew was from culture that it seems like it's empowering. There's people that I already knew that were in OnlyFans. I was like, they seem happy. It seems like they make a lot of money. Okay, by the information that I have, I'll go for it. So I didn't really have that lens on of like small business owners and a way to really help
Okay.
build your platform. But I feel like in the beginning, that's what a lot of people would have had. But then obviously when COVID hit, it just changed the entire dynamic of what this platform ended up being.
I see. So then let's go ahead and keep going on that theme real quick because it seems like what is peddled on OnlyFans is not reality.
Yeah.
And by not reality, meaning you're thinking that you're having this interaction with this beautiful girl, something along those lines. And reality, there's somebody behind the keyboard that is not even in the country or somewhere
Mm,
else. And they're basically having that one-on-one interaction, which really plays into a phenomenon among gamers and young people in the United States. I'll just talk primarily from our experience
yeah.
that when you're online and you think you're talking to Hollywood star, an actor, an actress, you're thinking you're really getting to know somebody and you're buying into a dream, it seems like.
Yeah.
Does that seem anywhere close to what was going on with OnlyFans?
100%. And like one of my favorite things that I say is we need to shatter the illusion.
Hmm.
And especially when it comes to people who purchase sex in any type of capacity, there's this illusion that they have. The girl wants this, she likes this, she's into it, it's her free will. And when you can kind of shatter that reality for a lot of men, that's where they go, oh, and they kind of reject it because, like, no, this is wrong, and their morality comes into it. And we see that a lot when people intercept with sex buyers, and there's a whole kind of thing and rabbit hole we could go down there. But yes, the biggest allure of OnlyFans is, as I said, we can have a conversation. So it's like instead of it being from, I guess, more traditional online pornography like Pornhub, where it's nameless and faceless people in quotation marks,
Right.
so you can now, that favorite influencer, that celebrity, oh dang, I can actually have a conversation with her on OnlyFans. I can ask her to do things. I can build a relationship with her.
Right.
And so that's where this allure comes in. And you think that you're sitting there and you're talking to this girl and she loves it. And you can do these things called custom requests. And so you can get her to do any fantasy that you want. And so there's this illusion of it. But as you said, yes, there's these things called chatters. So if we kind of come back to the business model of it,
Hmm.
realistically, just say if you have a girl who has hundreds of thousands of followers on her social media, she's funneling all those followers to her OnlyFans. So, well, we now know that it's about communication and sitting here and having a conversation. Well, she can't facilitate talking to thousands of people every single day across all these different time zones, 7 days a week. So she offsets that. That's why an agency comes in. So an agency pretends to be the girl on their behalf to be able to maximize the profits on the account to take a percentage in the basics of the fundamentals of what it is. But as a business model, we're not going to be the ones sitting there talking. So you have to offset that work to cheap labor. So we would actually hire people from the Philippines, would pay them $1 to $5 an hour. And for literally 6 to 7 days a week, they would sit there and impersonate multiple girls across OnlyFans accounts. And it's a commission sales role. So their job is to make as much money as possible off these subscribers.
You know, it's very interesting. It's really as the advanced form of pornography because when you go into the adult industry and the porn industry that's been around for obviously a long time, they do sort of the same similar thing where they will shoot a video in a certain country with a certain actress. But if it translates into another language, they will hire other voice actors to make the sounds, the moans, and everything else. And there'll be somebody from like South America or something like that if it's in the Latino community. And so you have this person up there, and there's a very funny, there's a very wonderful musical from back in the day called Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
And Singing in the Rain has this wonderful scene where there's this lead actress, and basically Singing in the Rain is a whole bunch of actors that are transitioning from black and white into color and from voiceless to voicing. And so there's this beautiful actress. She has the worst voice in the world, so they dub her.
Oh, no
And they
way.
have this beautiful lady that has this wonderful voice, but eventually the illusion is shattered and people find out this lady has a terrible voice. And the pornography industry, they sort of did the same thing for a lot of their videos where they overdub it and other things when they're selling it in other countries especially. So OnlyFans seems like it took that model and really ramped it up that not only are you thinking you're having a conversation with somebody, but it's somebody else entirely, it's fake. And I want to go back to something that you said about shattering the illusion and the morality that I'm going to specifically assume that most people soliciting OnlyFans are men. Would that be correct? And a correct assumption?
Yeah.
All right. So then we have to deal with the male psychology a little bit too, because in the background of most men, they are compartmentalizing, if I can use that word, because from the data that we're looking at, even from the perspective of the church and Christianity and religion, there are probably a lot of people in public school educational system about over a decade ago in the US, we were being haunted by numbers basically saying that somewhere between 1 and 7 young men by the age of 12 to 14, they've either accidentally or intentionally consumed pornography. That number has spiked in the last 5 years alone. It's somewhere probably 1 in 4.
Yeah, wow.
It's really depressing, and the numbers aren't even that much better in the church. So if I go, I'm the head elder of my own church in New Jersey. If I go into there, the numbers, if they're anywhere between 1 in 7 to 1 in 9, basically I see that in the congregation, and somebody, if we're just doing numbers and stats in my church, that's probably either addicted to pornography because it's free. Perhaps they have some account on OnlyFans. There's a lot of demons in the darkness that I think a lot of us just don't want to address, don't know how to address. And if we do know about the problem at the end of the day, people are scared to approach it because it just seems really dark.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you in any way, shape, or form?
Yep. This is like one of my one of the things I love to talk about is this, and it's like if the church isn't the one who's educating our kids, the world will.
Correct.
As soon as you jump onto the phone, your child is being inundated with hypersexualized content, with content that's targeted either at young girls to softly groom them to think that their only dreams and goals and aspirations should be to be a sex worker. Because again, we have to understand that if you're jumping on social media, and soft influence is so much more powerful than hard influence. And so you're scrolling and you're a little girl and all you're seeing is these half naked women with thousands and thousands of likes and follows and all the reward. Of course, you're going to go, oh, well, to be liked and loved and rewarded in my world, in my society, I therefore must do this. And then for men, it's, well, a liked and rewarded woman is this. And so, but what we don't understand is there is an entire ecosystem and industry that is fabricating this content, that's manipulating algorithms for it to go viral. So that's what we think. But then for the church, it's like, dang, we can't be scared to have these conversations. Like for me, what's blown my mind and one of my favorite things to talk about is covenant theology. And I'm like, dang, for me, when I understood it, and I'm still trying to learn it, but about the Old Testament covenants and then the New Testament and how that mirror images in marriage of name change and bloodshedding and then the imagery of Jesus and marriage and the mystery. And I'm like, why can't we communicate these things with our young people, get them to understand the significance of why do you wait? Why is it important? Why do we have marriage? What are these values? What do they mean? And it's like when you can put the weight and the emphasis on why this matters and not be scared to have these conversations, like it blows my mind coming into, I guess, the Christian world and the biggest conversations with young people, how far is too far? How do you date? What are they? And it's like, there is no, like, it seems like the biggest mystery, but I'm like, the Bible has the answers, but we just need to have these conversations.
You know, that's such a great point, especially talking about covenant theology, the idea of marriage, because in America, when we go back about 50, 60, let's even say 70 years ago, you can see that the church had a massive influence on the culture. Speaking from the American's perspective, I'll give you an example. If we look at Hollywood, you have some of the biggest people that were directors. You look at movies such as Ben-Hur, you look at the Ten Commandments. The director of that himself was a Christian, won multiple Academy Awards. It feels like in the culture of America, the church sort of took its foot off the pedal when it came to culture. And then when you take your foot off the pedal, the old saying is nature abhors a vacuum. Something has to fill that in. God took a rib from Adam in the middle. And that is because he took it from the middle, because if he did it any lower, the man would be stepping on the woman. And if he did anything higher, the woman would think she's above the man. From the rib, we are equals in salvation under the law and under grace. So I think it's amazing that you actually bring up that whole idea of what young girls are going through in America, because it really corresponds with the trends and everything doing. And I guess the point I want to just say is when the church steps away from that void, the devil's going to fill it in. And so let's go ahead and start talking about trends, because before we started this podcast today, we actually talked about some of the other influences going on in terms of anime and other things, because we see not just young girls, but young men. Japanese culture is amazing, by the way. You know, samurais, Bushido, Code of the Samurai.
My favorite
it's really
thing.
cool.
I know.
It's really cool.
So hard.
Historically, it's terrible, but in hindsight, it's amazing. You know, there's these macho men with honor and samurai, and these glamorous, you know, women that are really well presented and things like that. But anime has had a very interesting influence around the whole world, where it seems like in the culture, young people in America, I'm going to talk about, we see them imitating hairstyles. We see them imitating the actual voice acting. They're picking up Japanese phrases. And it feels like there is a category of things that is dark on the internet that is being influenced by Japanese culture. Is that making any sense to you in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, it is. It totally is. And there's like two things I want to say about that. The first one, was, we're kind of talking off camera about this, but for everyone as well, back when I did my first tour in the States and I was coming home, I was at going to pick up my bag back in Australia at the airport, and I get pulled aside and I get taken into customs, and they're going through my bag and they're asking me like, "Are you here by yourself? Did you pay for your ticket? Did all these things? And where were you?" And I'm like, "What is going on?" And so as they're kind of interviewing me and asking me all these different questions, they pull out this speaker list, and it says like a global summit to end sexual exploitation speaker, and then it had my name. And so the guy goes, "Oh, wait, you're one of us?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is kind of what I do." And he's like, "Oh," he's like, "We thought that you were getting trafficked." But he just starts, and it was literally God. He starts to word vomit all this information that I don't think he's supposed to tell.
Right, right.
But what he said, which ties into this, is he goes, "We're rescuing about 1 to 4 women from Japan currently every single week." And he said that right now we're seeing that the most watched porn is Japanese porn. So he's like, we're just being over precautious, and we're taking every single like kind of single female that fits a specific profile in for questioning because there's so much trafficking happening. And I was like, interesting. But then I was just going to say, what we're seeing now is I actually do outreach in the brothels back home. And so majority of the brothels that we go into, it's all Japanese women.
You know,
And
that
so,
corresponds
yeah.
with a lot of data that we see coming in. Pornhub, which is used to be what it probably still is the most visited site in the world when it
Yeah.
comes to pornography, which the states, by the way, have been cracking down. So certain states are actually outlawing and banning it,
Yeah.
which, to be fair, while that, and I'm going to say this to all of our listeners too, while that may seem really good, the problem is there are so many pornography sites out there. Okay, you ban the number one, but there's like 50,000, I'm being metaphorical, obviously,
Yeah.
of other things they can go. And going into, I think the phrase is hentai when it comes to the Japanese things. Pornhub had this stat that they would tweet out on Twitter when it was Twitter before it was X. And they'd be like, and here's a map of us cataloging every state or country
Yeah.
and what is the most visited terms that people are looking up. You could go to Utah, and I'm just making this up on the fly. Maybe it was a cousin. You can go to, let's say, a state like, I'm going to say Wisconsin, and yes, anime hentai was on there. And they were proudly breaking it down, what people were viewing in the darkness of their homes. And you're sitting there and you're just thinking to yourself, my goodness, this is crazy, because in a country, especially, again, I'm going to speak from America's point of view.
Yeah.
America used to be highly, highly religious, to the point that we used to call them shotgun weddings, right? If you dated a girl and you got her pregnant, you had to marry that girl. This was going back 70 years. That was just what you did.
Yeah.
You could not do anything like that. You had to marry her. Then, when no-fault divorce ended up being passed, whether you are fine with it or good for that, that's not the point I want to get into. What we end up seeing is sort of a liberalization in the family unit, where marriage is more seen as, look, we get together, it works out or it doesn't, and then we go our separate ways, split the bank accounts or whatever. And it feels like we sort of devalued it. It's tough because at one point in our culture, I feel like we hammered it too hard, to the point that, a woman could be abused, the husband could be cheating on her, and it's like, no, we got to keep them together, which we would say no in that case. And then we went to the opposite other side, where it's like, well, what does marriage really mean anyway? And just, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, we go our own way. And it feels like the baby boomer generation, so it goes in our country, baby boomer generation, that's World War II. Then you have Generation X. Then you have the millennial generation, which is my generation. Then you have the Zoomer generation coming up after us. It seems like the boomer generation did the experimentation on the family. The Generation X was kind of the result of that, and the millennial is even the result of that. And it's been this sort of three-generation experiment. And now we all feel like we're lost. We all feel like we're lonely. We all feel like we're depressed, and we are all now online. Not all, but a lot of people are online trying to find fulfillment in OnlyFans, trying to, if you're not going out, we see that men in particular, there's about 6 million young men in America, no job, no family, living with their parents, just off the grid, we call them. Off the grid. And it seems like all these trends are converging now, and people like you are giving a wake-up call to not just the church, but the whole entire culture, being, hey, there's got to be a better path.
Well, that's something, I'm extremely especially just in this anti porn sex trafficking movement or whatever. A lot of people really demonize the men and demonize the buyers, and they're these monsters and all. It's of course we can't negate the fact that there are some people, evil exists, and that is real. But majority of these men, that's what I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's like, why is this working? So we would train our chatters in this thing called the girlfriend experience. Now, statistically speaking, I think I saw a study that about 89.7%, but I can find that to verify it, of men who consume OnlyFans are married. And it's like, why is the girlfriend experience working on married men? Why is this happening? Why are we being so inundated with just, men consuming this in a way that we've never really seen before. I saw a study that it was like 500,000 people a day are signing up for OnlyFans to be a subscriber.
I could believe it. I could believe it.
And so it comes back to this greater cultural thing. And I love that because this isn't necessarily just about OnlyFans, but it's like, what is this doing culturally? And it's like, when we, unfortunately, I think that this toxic era of feminism, whatever it is, and it's destroying men and their essence and who they are and how we champion them and exactly how we love each other and how we're supposed to act. And it's like, well, if we continue down this path, we're going to see this like just kind of destruction of our society, of marriages, of relationships. And it's like, if we can just go back again to championing these things, that's why I love, it's like, as the church, we're really called to champion these things, not that toxic purity culture, not put people down, not all this, but like, I was having this conversation the other day on a podcast and I'm like, again, if you think about how we're supposed to champion men, how they're wired, again, if you have a look at Christ, like love your wife, like Christ loved the church and died for the church and all, like if you can champion those values, a man's going to take that over this false sense of pursuit that he gets from OnlyFans. And that's what it is. It's mimicking, I think, what is innately in men. That's why, like, you can manipulate algorithms so easily to be able to target the weakest essence of a man. And it's like that this needs to be a bigger conversation of, again, how do we not, I don't think, shift the culture, but build a new culture where we go, we totally reject all of this. We want to champion each other. I always say, attack the problem, not the person. The problem is this over-sexualized culture. The problem is a $97 billion porn industry. The problem is that we have had toxic purity culture, that unfortunately we have gone to a lot of judgment in the church and harshness and not actually understanding the Bible and the God that we serve. So it's like, how do we build a new culture where we do champion these values? We raise up men who are manly men in the healthy way they're supposed to be, women that are healthy women. And I'm like, that's how you'll see a real change and a shift for the generations to come, you know?
No, and that's wonderful because there's so many wonderful things you said there. Purity culture I want to tack on really quick because in the United States that was huge.
Yeah.
I remember growing up, especially, I was born in 1986, so I'm an old man now, but in the early 90s, purity culture, especially in evangelicals, and we're Seventh-day Adventists here, but we were very familiar with purity culture, and it was hammered, you know, no sex before marriage, none of this, yada, 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 sin, 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 sin. And a lot of people tried to follow that purity culture and it just didn't work out. It didn't work out. And what's interesting is when you look in the Bible, and we go to the Old Testament, the book of Joshua, there's a wonderful person by the name of Rahab.
Yeah.
And in the story of when the Israelites are crossing the river Jordan and they're going to conquer the promised land, they have to go to this place called Jericho. And there's this one lady in Jericho. She is a lady of the night.
Yeah.
And she is clearly, when you look at the story of it, the way Joshua is portraying her is actually in a very sympathetic and loving light. He doesn't mince words. He clearly says, you know, she is a prostitute, but when Joshua sends spies into Canaan land, they go to Jericho, and she actually hides them from government officials. And the king himself, or the lord of the city, comes in and says, look, we think you have spies in your house. Bring them out. We need to take care of them. And she basically says, no, they're not here. And she defends them. She lets them out through the window and basically says, look, before you leave, I want to know about your God, and I think I'm a believer. Please remember me when you come to sack the city, because she had heard the stories of how the Israelites had left Egypt and the Red Sea had ended up parting. She had seen the River Jordan and this whole tribe of probably around 3 million people just crossing the water as it parts. So she is a believer. And so what happens is the spies go back, and when they come to conquer Jericho, they specifically say, hey, this woman who lives on the wall, she lived on the outer wall, which meaning if the city is sacked, she's going to be the first one to end up getting killed.
Yeah.
But as the walls of Jericho come tumbling down, that part of the wall stays up, and Rahab is brought into the household of Israel. And not only that, when you get into the New Testament, when you trace the genealogy of Christ, Rahab is in it. Yeah. So for our Lord and Savior, there's a lady of the night completely committed to the faith that ends up being in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And we need to remember that sort of grace that we have for both women and men, that God can take us from the darkest places. It's one thing if you're the unrepentant sinner. It's the other thing when you're the sinner stuck in a mire that knows that they're doing wrong and they want to turn their life around. Victoria, how do you help turn people's lives around when they're mired in this sin and they're struggling with it?
It's a great question. All I can do is kind of just go off, I guess, my personal experience and
go ahead.
How
Let
I've
us know.
mirrored that to other people. And so for me, when wild series of events ended up at church, the lady speaking at church was talking about OnlyFans.
Please tell us about your conversion. Like, what on earth made you actually step back into the Christian faith at all?
Okay, and this will kind of tie into the question, because I think it's really important to answer that. But so working at this OnlyFans agency, yeah, my role was to make girls go kind of as viral as possible, as quickly as possible. So I was doing all the front end marketing on social media. That's how I guess I have such an in-depth knowledge in all of this. But what we had figured out when we were working there is that if you're impersonating a person, I'm doing all the social media, then the OnlyFans manager's doing all the OnlyFans stuff. You as a subscriber, if you're talking to this girl on social media and then on OnlyFans, but we're not communicating as management, there's holes in our story now. So what we had to do is we had to change the structure of the business. So instead of doing all of the marketing and just doing that, the girls got split in half and you'll do the full life cycle. So then I started to see all the porn and I was like, oh, dang, like this is what we're doing. And I've never really been a consumer of porn, never watched it, anything like that. So I'm seeing pornography for the first time. It's people that I know. It's girls that I've been starting to build relationships with. And the easiest way I can explain it is I just malfunctioned. Like, I'm like, she's so kind. She has such good family values. Like, I still think every time I say this.
Can I stop you right there? When you say malfunction, so in psychology, when they're studying people that are pornography addicted, especially for those that have accidentally consumed it, like let's say, even if we're getting into the grooming category where there's an adult, they intentionally leave back in the day like a DVD out, that's an adult thing or something like that, or a magazine or whatever. Young people, when they were looking at it because they've never seen it before, especially if before they hit puberty, for example, they sort of malfunction. They're wondering, what on earth am I looking at? And are you having a moment like that where you're seeing it and then your brain's like, what on earth am I looking at?
Yep, that's exactly what's happening. Because I'm like, oh, like, and I guess I'm grown up enough to know this is wrong. This is weird. Like, why are we watching people have sex or do? And so I'm like, oh, like, and it just makes you feel weird. And so I'm having that, and I'm like, and again, I know these girls, and I know the characteristics of them, and I'm learning who they are, and so it just made me feel yucky. Like that's the easiest word I can use. It just didn't make me feel good. And so I'm like, I'm struggling every day. I'm crying. I can't do it. So I just went searching for answers and I started to ask people at the agency, what do you think about what we do? And they're like, people need a safe place to do drugs. We give people a safe place to do porn, like just weird stuff. And I just wasn't satisfied with the answers. And I was really struggling with sobriety as well. At that point, the drinking and the drugs and all the things are out of control and nothing's making me feel better. I can't numb this anymore. I'm staying awake for days on end when I am partying. And I'm like, nothing's working. And I was like, but I don't feel good. But the world tells me, everyone tells me that this is the pinnacle of success, the parties, the outfits, the dinners, like all the crap. And I'm like, okay, I need to offset all the bad that I'm doing. So maybe if I do a big enough deed, it'll make all the bad things go away. I'll feel better about myself. And we were building a cannabis company at the time too. So I was like, okay, if I can go like help refugees, like go overseas, do something really extreme, then I'll offset all the bad that I'm doing. I'll come back. The medicinal cannabis company will be up and running. That's my dream. I don't have to work at the OnlyFans agency anymore. Genius. So I had this random memory that this church that I went to as a child had like a refugee program. So I was like, sick, I'll Google the church and I'll sign up for that. And so basically I signed up for this outreach thing and I find out like months later that application actually never went to like the outreach department. But the young adults pastor actually got an email that said, Victoria wants to reach out to the church. Here's her number. Call her. So I get a call one day from this girl. She's like, hey, I heard you want to come down to church and do you want to come down this Thursday? And I'd alluded to what was going on, but of course I'm not like, I thought that it's just like the vetting process for Christians for like, I don't know. But I rock up to church on this Thursday and I can remember sitting in my car at the front of this church in the car park and this voice was just screaming in my head, you cannot walk into that church. You are such a bad person. You will literally burst into flames if you walk in there. And I remember sitting in my car and I'm wrestling with myself and I'm like, Vic, you're just here. This person's waiting for you. Just go in. So I end up going in and for hours I'm word vomiting to this sweet woman. Just, I sell porn. I'm also like, I don't know, the cannabis, like, I don't know, drugs, alcohol, like help, like everything. Everyone says this is good. I don't know. Like, and she just listened and she just goes, I really think that you should come to church this weekend. I think you'll really resonate with the guest speaker. So I rock up to church on a Sunday and the guest speaker in church is talking about this over-sexualized culture. And she's talking about the dangers of things like OnlyFans. And she's talking about what's happening in schools to our youth because she goes around the country and she sees it. And she said this line and I didn't understand what it meant then, but I do now. And she goes, Christians are supposed to be the salt and the light of the earth and they have failed and we are destroying the next generation. And it just clicked
She's
something.
quoting Jesus, yes.
Yeah. And I just went, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. This is wrong. I am like, this is wrong what we're doing. I knew this was wrong. And so when she finished speaking, I was like in the balcony, like at the back. But I ran down to this woman and I just went up to her and I said, "My name's Victoria. I work for an OnlyFans agency and I hate myself."
Scene stop right there. My goodness. So not only were you battling with your conscience, the still small voice, it seems like you had a devil on your shoulder basically saying you're not good enough, don't go in, don't go in.
Yeah.
You're going to look, you're going to hell anyway. And this is actually something very interesting because when we counsel people that have really tragic backgrounds, a lot of the times they always feel like they are not worthy enough
Yeah.
to step into the light.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you step into the light is going to purify you. And it's the same thing when it comes to light. I remember listening to some of the other podcasts that you did, and you had a really good phrase when you talked about when it comes to being in a loving relationship, how
Yeah.
there's a fire that's burning. And that the fire in the fireplace is a sacred spot.
Yeah.
It warms the light, comforts the home. But if you take that fire into the bedroom, then everybody sort of gets burned, right?
Yeah.
And so it's sort of that balance. And what's interesting about everything that you're saying here, it is the classic conversion experience.
Yeah.
And so when we look at you and we hear your conversion story, we're thinking, it looks like God is going to use Victoria Sinis for a lot of stuff, not for her purpose, but for his purpose. I think that's amazing at the end of the day. So I want to go back to a quicker thing real quick
Yeah.
as you continue the story.
Yeah.
You were saying that some of the people that you help are people in the brothels and everything like that.
Yeah.
When people want to come out of that life, what is the avenue? What is the pathway? What do you see happen? Are they having an experience like you where they're thinking, I know this lifestyle is wrong. I know it's harming my health. How do I get out of it? I don't know what to do. Have you had any experiences like with other people?
Well, that's so interesting. So specifically in the brothels, this comes back to that whole question about legalization because
Right.
back home,
We definitely have
this
to touch
is-
on this point.
yeah,
Yes.
it's legal. So what we're seeing culturally, and that's why I care so much about this, is that when we go into brothels, so just say one, so yes, of course, as I said, there is trafficking and that exists and it's real and it's a problem. But what we are noticing now is because this is legal, it is so glorified. Back home, our biggest influencers are sex workers. So we, again, are seeing a generation of women that actually want to do this, that again are saying, this is elite. This is what I want to do. This is mad. I'm like this amazing bougie queen because I make all this money and I sell sex and whatever. So when we go into brothels, I'm actually yet to meet someone that doesn't want to be there.
Get out.
So one of the women...
Is that seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
So one of the women that we went to, and so again, that's what I'm saying. This stuff does exist and it is real, but this is the legalization conversation. So one of the brothels we went into was Japanese girls, and it was actually some of the ladies that did outreach. It wasn't me that specifically went in. They told us this. So that one of the girls was like, "Oh yeah, I'm here on a year contract and I'm just going to do this. And then I go back home and I'll continue to study, but I just wanted to make a bunch of money. So that's why I'm here in Australia doing this. And obviously there's the need for Japanese girls and then I'll just go back home." And so I'm like, oh, that was the first one. Then we went into another brothel, which was all predominantly Australian women. And you can just tell, and it was a Saturday, it was a Friday night, and they're just having a great time, and we're in the dressing room with them, and we're chatting, and we're giving them gifts, and but that's the energy. It's not these broken women, they wanted to be there. And because again, if you come in as they sense that energy. So you come in and you match their vibe. So I'm coming, yeah, we just come and we just give gifts to you guys, that type of thing. Oh my gosh, that's so cute. I love that. No way. Yeah, well, and they make jokes about the work that they do and all this. And so I'm like, oh, you want to be here. You're not these women who are being trapped. So all of that to say, and then again, if you just jump on TikTok in Australia, you will see that there is so many women that want to do this. They again idolize OnlyFans girls, full service sex workers, everything. So it's when you legalize this, that's where it's OnlyFans agencies go from being a pimp to being an account manager, from being a woman that is being coerced and manipulated to being your client. Then a subscriber goes from being someone that's a sex buyer and is taking advantage to, well, he's just, so the terminology changes and the lens change when you legalize all of this, then you get desensitized to it. And that's why you think it's normal.
That's a very important point as we're beginning to run short on time.
Yeah.
A few things I want to touch on real quick. So in Amsterdam, they were one of the first European countries that actually legalized prostitution. And they thought it would be a sort of solve all problems for a lot of issues. And what's interesting is we're looking at it almost probably over a decade later now. What we found out, and this may coincide with your marketing agency, is the people that actually run the areas that have been legalized for prostitution, it's basically the mafia and the mob. that have they take away women's passports, they don't let them out of the country and things like that. And so in America, we legalized weed a number of years ago, and a lot of people are regretting that, including myself. But at the end of the day, we're looking at sort of the trends that are going for legalization of prostitution, and we're looking and we're saying, well, what happens is people are thinking that these people are going to be self-independent women, they're going to take control of their destiny, and then they basically just get either a mob or an agency ends up running everything for them or taking over their whole life, and then they get stuck in a situation that they can't get out of. Another thing that we should probably touch on is when it comes to OnlyFans. 80, I'm guessing 80% of the people there aren't making that much money.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
It's really just a few. What is the percentage of people actually making real money?
Yeah. So the average wage of an OnlyFans creator is $180 a month.
Okay, that's dirt poor.
Yep. Isn't it? Like literally. So the realisticness is you're going to jump on, you're going to think that you're going to make all this money. You're going to have to do full blown pornography and you're not going to make a lot of money. And so you're going to have all of this on the internet for forever, make maybe a couple $100, try to delete your account. It's not easy to get rid of an OnlyFans account. And then you have to deal with those consequences. And then for people that are like, oh, but you know, I think I could make it, just say as a devil's advocate.
Everybody thinks they're going to win the lotto.
There's a statistic, it was in 2022 or 2023, there was 2.1 million creators on OnlyFans, and only 300 of those 2.1 million made more than $1 million a year.
So really, the few people that do make the money, whether it's six figures or over $1 million, they're stepping over the corpses of thousands of people that aren't making anything.
Yeah. Exactly. Wow. And like, again, you have to put this in perspective. There is like mega celebrities that are on these platforms, like Cardi B. I think Black China was on there, Iggy Azalea, like, and then even the Bop House girls, like you've got Sophie Rain, like you've got these people with mega influence. So of course you're going to think, oh, you can make all this money. But when you're putting it in comparison of people that have millions of followers that can funnel those followers to these platforms, again, you have to think of this from a business perspective. And so people are like, I have 100 followers. Oh, I could jump on and do this. And it's like, unfortunately, no. And you have to understand that there is a real consequence to this. And so again, shattering that illusion that a lot of young women think that they can just jump on, do this in the shadows, make some money, go travel. But realistically, that's not, the truth.
This is such a conversation. We can keep going forever. And it's amazing because I think it's really necessary to get this message out to everybody in the world, not just the Christian church.
Yeah.
So I want to end on a note that basically says, from where you have come from to where you are now, how has God worked in your life?
Oh my gosh, every single minute, smallest, microscopic detail.
Okay.
He has changed every single element of me as a person. He has healed my mental health, depression, severe obsessive compulsive thoughts, anxiety, suicidal ideations, addictions, all in the matter of weeks. Jesus radically changed every essence of me. He healed me from literally incurable, like I had endometriosis, polycystic ovaries, gone. Like Jesus has just transformed me. And the thing is, I'm not special. That's just the power of God. Like, Amen. I'm not a unique person in that case, but I just believed the word. I took the word at the word. God, you said that you could heal. God said you could do this. Okay, if that's what it is, I need people to pray for me. I went to bat on all these things. And then even just the kindness of God to do that. So I hope that encourages people that that's not something for someone on a camera screen or what. That's for every single person, that you can have this incomprehensible freedom and peace and joy and love if you just take God at his word and just watch what he does with that, And so he's changed everything in a year and a half for me.
That is amazing. And you too can be transformed by Christ if you let him into your life. Victoria, it has been a pleasure. We're so happy to have you. Can we end with a word of prayer? Would that be all right?
I love that.
Let's do it. Father in heaven, you see your daughter Victoria here. You see how you are using her for your glory. We ask that you continue to strengthen her, uplift her, hold her in the palm of your hand so that whatever she says, it comes from you, Lord. You have taken her from darkness into the light, and we thank you so much for everything that you've done for her. So strengthen her in the name of Christ, I pray. Amen. Amen. Victoria, thank you so much. Thanks. It is our pleasure and privilege to have you here at the Wisdom Pro podcast.
Thank you so much. That was great.